we're delighted that you're joining us for this session today. And my name is Karen Weigert. I lead the Baumhart Center for Social Enterprise and Responsibility. One of the things that means is that we work with professionals who are choosing their careers, building business skills through our Baumhart Scholars MBA program. And we have a couple of alums here, and I'm super excited because there are jobs and new economies being created. So there's wild optimism about the way both community and economy can work together over time. And we're gonna get a super good deep dive into what that means in a very specific part of our world here in Chicago. So how many people in this room were actually on the tour this morning? Anybody sneak out? Okay, excellent. Well, welcome back to some of our conversation. For those of you who were not on the tour, no worries. We're gonna dig in today on folks who are rewriting the climate action playbook. And we're thinking ground up, justice first, and delicious. How often do you get that together? So with that, I'd love to get a grounding in who's up here, who actually is leading and doing this work. So if you wouldn't mind, Janelle, I'll start with you. Just dig in a little bit, all sorts of like food and agriculture analogies. Dig in, help us grow in our knowledge of the work that you are building.
Well, thank you guys for having me. So there's going to be a quiz at the end. Who can guess where I'm from based on my accent? We'll ask at the end. Those of you who met me earlier, don't say anything. Don't be cheaters, right? My name is Janelle St. John, and I have the pleasure of being the executive director of Growing Home. We're a USDA certified organic farm. We're also GAP certified, and we exist in an urban environment. We exist in Inglewood, which is on the south side of Chicago. And for Chicagoans, everyone knows the narrative of Inglewood. So I'm always very happy to brag that the only USDA certified organic farm in Chicago and the surrounding area is located in Inglewood since 2006. So sourcing local and those things aren't new to us. It was the community that came up with this solution to food insecurity. And so Inglewood, wherever you go, say, well, I heard about all that violence, but did you know? Thank you.
I love it. Anton, take us into your work, please.
I am the lead steward and co-founder of Grow Greater Inglewood. And so, as I was saying, a lot of my work is working in this intersection around food systems work and also climate work and also community development. I come to this work as an organizer, as a kind of a community brother at large, actually. I do a few things beyond Grow Greater Inglewood. But I think one of the things that I would want to share is that for myself, what brings me to this work was, you know, when you find what your calling is and what draws you to something. So a big part of the work has been this Inglewood Nature Trail that is now kind of grown into the agro-eco district, which we're super proud of, which is giving forth a vision to further fine-tune what happens to spaces that are left behind in communities like Inglewood that are filled with so much social and human capital and so much history and knowledge that is often flattened by a narrative that is missing huge parts of the story. So I think that that's what our work is. My t-shirt says We Deserve Beautiful Spaces is a mandate around the beauty that the earth is and who we are as part of the earth, because we're all connected. So we're not above or below nature, we're a part of it.
Well, that's a perfect introduction for me. My name's Erica Allen, and I'm the CEO of Urban Growers Collective, and also founder and partner of Green Era for Green Era Sustainability, and Green Era Educational NFP, not-for-profit developer that built basically an anaerobic digester campus, the first of its kind that's agricultural, and also hopefully one of the keys for addressing climate change by capturing methane from food that normally would go to landfills, usually co-located next to where many of our communities live. And it's something that all of us can be part of. And this really came out of my work as an artist and art psychotherapy. Surprisingly, the arc of addressing structural violence and specifically youth incarceration through diversion. Originally it was going to be art and therapeutic intervention instead of incarceration, so restorative justice work. And after 9/11, when I realized everybody was food insecure, and that my upbringing on a small family farm, and knowing that my peers didn't know how to grow food was an incredibly important skill, and that this could be one of the things that could really bring an economic lever to some of the community work that I was doing. And I knew that the root cause of the structural violence is economic. So being able to really do the healing work, creating spaces that are safe and generative, and just sort of oases within communities that we don't necessarily have agency in because we don't have ownership. Being part of this movement over 25 years here in Chicago, and really seeing the needle shift in terms of policy and understanding, and also this kind of partnership that we are able to leverage the work that we do, from organizing through workforce development, youth engagement, and being able to create circular economies that actually can be to build wealth, and that can be controlled by the community, having sovereignty. And all of this within the context of climate change, because you can't, in my opinion, address climate change without dealing with historic inequities. So that's what I do.
I've got a little grounding in who's with us today. You're going to have some images rotate behind, so it'll just give you some touch points to some of the conversations you're going to hear. And we'll be able to dive in together for 35, 40 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up. So definitely think of the questions that you have. See what sparks your imagination as you try to imagine a different future, but it's one that's being built every day here. So I'd love to come back, and as the folks are in this room looking at panels often are folks who might have just met, like Janelle and I actually really did just meet, but you all know each other. And so this is not about three separate visions. This is actually an incredible story of an ecosystem that you are essentially cultivating together. And I'd love to get more insights into how these sorts of collaborations are actually being built and then delivered. How'd this get started?
I can say, because people say we can't do it, right? When I came to Inglewood, there's a lot of stuff about there needs to be more collaboration. People aren't collaborative. And those things aren't true. Like-minded people find each other. And I think ultimately the collaboration is in not what we do, but the purpose of why we do it. And it's to build our community. I always say growing home is a means to an end. And that end is community building. That end is economic development. And it could be different tools. So we don't just have partners in urban ag. We have partners in youth. We have partners in community development. So it's not just us, because we do understand that it takes more than just the three of us or 4 or 5 of us to truly make the differences in our community. So when the core of who we are is community, we can't help but to bump into each other and say, hey, I think we should work together. But of course, we all like food.
Yeah. That's true. And what I would add is specifically for Grow Greater Inglewood, that grew out of a community apparatus. We started as a coalition that then grew into an organization, specifically to address, to make sure in a predominantly black community that there would be black farmers and representation of people who are owning and stewarding the land. And this predates the kind of what's in our lexicon now around Black Lives Matter, and now a post of that now in the world we live in. So this kind of pendulum that we've seen. And because I think, the intentionality is like, who do we come from? So it's the core basis of the American story in particular. And for those of us, for my family, has a deep roots in Inglewood. My grandmother went to Inglewood High School with Lorraine Hansberry, class in 1948. So there's a history there of like what this community that I knew about. And I didn't even grow up there. I'm from South Shore, another community. So as you know, in Chicago, we got 77 of these communities. But throughout this lace and the spine is that we still are responsible to, uphold and make sure that we are creating vibrancy in our community. So it's not about the egos of the different organizations. It's about the people that we serve. And that is a lot of work to take on, to kind of know when to step up and when to step back. When to keep the circle open, when to, make sure that you stand guard. When do you gatekeep? These are all part of the process. It's not a one or done piece. And then I think ultimately we have committed ourselves, as Janelle said, to who we are actually servicing. Our people are under a lot of duress, even before this time now that people are under duress. And so I think that conversation and our work manifests itself in that way because we're providing opportunities for people to work. And I think that's part of the conversation we're going to have today is that in this inflection point now, in these kind of spaces, that the work that has been built that is not abandoned, in particular for those of us who are first on the front line in American cities, in American small towns, that resource is there for us to continue to build out where people have already started to do the work with or without resource. So I think that is why we stick together because, as we said earlier today on our tour, was like we have each other. Because this time is a crazy time, not just for us, but for the people we serve. When they hear this news or when it impacts them, these SNAP benefits people talk about, well, that has been tremendous for them to come to a market and be able to get for seniors who work their entire lives to get, $10 worth of groceries that is really worth, $50. That's a huge thing. So it's unfortunate that in our culture has been reduced to a soundbite like that these folks aren't deserving of it. So I think we have each other to kind of lean on in these times.
Erica, how do you build that?
I mean, how did we build it, or how do we scale it? Is that?
Yeah, like how did you build from the idea of it's a shared vision into something that is a shared organizational structure, into the kinds of things that allow for you to scale?
So I think the scaling is, as Anton and Janelle has shared it's trust building and also asset development. We as leaders, and we've done the urban ag crawl, we've supported each other's initiatives, we're on each other's boards. So we're, similar in the corporate, world. Everybody, people bounce around from company to company, and so there is these collaborations. We just have never had the resources to be able to, especially within this not-for-profit work, which is really a result of cleaning up all the things that extractive economies have left behind. So we're restoring I'd like to be just fully in business and doing other things, but I had a calling, I think all of us that do this work in our communities, because of our privilege, because of our passion for our people and for the environment. And we're doing basic human needs stuff. We're not doing anything that's particularly radical. We're trying to make sure people have nutritious food, that people aren't displaced because of development, and that things aren't being planned around us or over us, like seeing the things that we're doing and then extracting it for wealth that does not benefit the community. And we've seen this happen over and over and over again. So I think we, especially with the pandemic, provided us the opportunity to really form something we call the squad. Yeah. And we coalesced, and because of our collective knowledge, we were able to respond in these really powerful ways, not just in the moment, but for the long term. Out of that came several co-ops run and operated by formerly incarcerated Black women who now own several buildings, including housing, so they're stable. So that entire family system that was destroyed over generations because of incarceration is coming back. When we talk about wealth, we're not talking about living in a golf course in Florida, or gold toilet bowls is my favorite example. Like, that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a home, generational stability. Where no one has anxiety about having medical care, like basic stuff. Kids can go to college. That that when you retire, that you have things to share with your grandchildren. That's what we're talking about. But we call it wealth. So even in the lexicon of the scaling or how we kind of build, we're kind of stepping into it for the first time. My people, I come from two lines. So I always joke with the Anton that my people are from the East Coast, because on my dad's side, we're from South Carolina, and we, through the Great Migration, which really should be called the flee from terror, which really it was a fleeing from lynching. If you were too successful, you would be targeted and lynched, and your property would be taken away, and all the apparatuses were in place for that to happen. So you could not win, and so we had to leave behind our land and migrate just to survive, especially if you push back. So knowing that and reframing that is part of the healing work we're doing as well. It is healing for us in our communities, for our communities to see us work together. There's also the tropes that we don't get along, and that's very, very orchestrated, because if I get a bunch of funding or get attention and nobody else does, of course, I'm going to be, kind of looked at in a certain way, any of us. And we have been able to overcome that strategically by informing and building these relationships with folks with more wealth, with, understanding the politics, and also being very open about the history of extraction and how that wealth has been built, and it was stolen from us, and we're just restoring it. White flight in Chicago is, that's a lot of what we're still dealing with, and the environmental impacts of that, right? Like the industry that never cleaned up. Green Arrow was built on a brownfield that was just left. And so when we start activating, we can't even get to the vision. We have to clean up all of the things that came before. So I think all of that is synonymous, and the scaling up really requires that foundation to be built, to be not just in the moment, but really having a 10-year kind of wingspan of resources to be able to plan ahead. Just to be able to plan ahead so that we can build, and especially since we're working with community members that are under incredible duress, at PTSD, all kinds of undiagnosed things that impact functionality, and that all that has to be addressed. So it's synonymous with climate change and the things you have to do. We also have to do this socially, and Chicago is sort of like, to me, like ground zero for this, because we have 77 neighborhoods. We are an immigrant city. We have all of this infrastructure and this understanding to be able to create these transformations.
I'm always a fan when Chicago can be the model for something good going forward. And the sophistication of the interlocking of your organizations around this vision is an example of a model for strengthening and building with assets that are here. So, Anton, I would love to pull you into part of this conversation. And you are building another asset when you think about the eco trail and the district, and some of Erica's reflection on the extractive economy that you've been around. There are things you're building. How does that stay local?
Well, we talked about this for a very long time. I think part of the staying local is it comes out of a local vision that was created. So many of you might know like a lot the quality of life planning processes, like what has occurred over the last, I would say, since Bill Clinton. Let's say let's use that as a marker, since now the Gen Xers are a little older. So the last 30 years, right? And the kind of promises of a neoliberal kind of agenda of, tell us what would make this community better. And you look at these plans for the last 30 years, and the community has said what it had needed. But what has been delivered, and this is kind of the political kind of framework that we're dealing with, is the fallout of that. It wasn't closed schools, right? It wasn't more charter schools. It wasn't these other solutions that were created somewhere else. It's not a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't have been other ideas present. But what it took and what it makes to stay local is that we had to listen to our fellow neighbors, the community wisdom that is there. And when I talk about this kind of flattened narrative, is that the presumption is that if you live in a certain neighborhood, like that you haven't had any life experiences, or you've never been downtown, or you don't, like these kind of crazy myths that are floated that people, other Americans, other Chicagoans like to believe. And I don't allow for that to, number one, exist, not in my presence, because you have a responsibility as an American citizen to know more and to do more, regardless of your color, because that's how America was made. So I'm going to keep challenging that notion. Like, like your grandfather is from Inglewood. Inglewood 100 years ago was mostly Lithuanian. People fleeing from Europe. How'd you forget? Right? Yeah. So in terms of local, it's kind of like the basis of the history. Right? And so from that is the ongoing, and that is not a destination though. It's an ongoing work that has to happen because you can't just make that statement. Like it is an ongoing, like what that means in an American system where I can go and learn I'm going to leave this place is for just cause, because there doesn't mean that terrible things did not happen. They were happening and are happening. So we're always trying to balance those two things, and in our work, what we see is, making sure that the vision that the community wants to see, that we are always able to stay nimble to adjust. So that is really focusing on the protections. So this infrastructure reuse project is great. We, the trail had been there, thought about, and it comes about because of a kind of give back from two railroads. It sits between two intermodal yards, two of the nation's largest railroads. And it sat vacant for 70 years. And it was a spine for light manufacturing of the manufacturing age, making parts for TVs and, timber and coal. Like that is what lived there. Yeah. And so for us, it is a continuation to make sure that the homeowners that live near what we're building are protected, that we are creating avenues for this complex web of all these intersections of urban agriculture, right, which is also energy, which is also community development, that young people, and not just young people, I'm always corrected now, even now the people who are getting older, they want to participate. And so we're always trying to make room for that. There's avenues for them to kind of grow and to be a part of that Statue of Liberty moment. Like I've got my brick that's part of the legacy of what I will leave behind. That's keeping it local.
Janelle, for folks who haven't been to Englewood, would you help us understand the strength, the challenges, and the beauty of Englewood?
I'll start with the strengths. I've been in nonprofit for more than 25 years. I've worked in Rogers Park, I've worked in Gary, Indiana, and I would say Englewood is the only community I know where community shows up. I almost say, no matter how much money you have, Englewood is so used to being hurt that they're ready to protect. And so they come out. The trail, we always had full attendance every time we hosted meetings every few months about where it's going. We know it's gonna take a long time, so it's very important that we constantly communicate and engage our community. We're always doing surveys. Like, I'm always impressed about how engaged the community is. And one day I'm gonna write a book about that, but that's in the future. So those are the strengths. The challenges, I don't say food desert, okay? We're food insecure. We were food insecure before 2 years ago when we've lost another 4 major grocery stores, right? And so every time something new comes into Englewood, people say, well, didn't they put a new grocery store down the street? Because I grew up in Rogers Park, I could say, what does it look like in your community? It's so easy to see what's not fair. It's not that hard. Englewood needs options like everyone else. I want growing home to be an option. You want your food from the ground with a little dirt on it? Growing home. Growing home should not be a necessity, right? And so, though we keep having these creativity and we're building solutions, we make 2 or 3 steps forward and then the outside puts us back 4. And they want us to solve our problems. We already have the solutions, but we need the investments to move those things forward. And I jokingly, which is not a joke, I'm always offended when people sell us back our own solutions, or when people come and let's do a survey and how can we get the community involved? Like these things, we do the census every 10 years. We don't need to be having these new surveys all the time. Like the problem is the problem. Let's not spend more money trying to talk about the problem, but really invest in the problem. And as Anton and Erica and all of our partners in Englewood would say, stop piecemealing the solution. We need real investment to see projects start and finish. And so those are some of the things you will see in Inglewood. We are not afraid. We're used to it. We're used to the long haul. We ain't got no problem saying what's on our mind, so we don't mind making people feel uncomfortable, right? We're fun. We're really fun.
Yeah, it's live.
Okay. And one of the things I always like to tell people about Inglewood residents are residents who bought into the American dream. If you were in Chicago, you won't see as many houses as you do see in Inglewood. It's not your fault your house doesn't have value because of the zip code you're in. These are people who have been in their house 30 odd years and now can't even have any equity in it. Whose fault is that? Right? So we didn't create the problem, and we shouldn't always be the ones to try to solve it, though we have the solutions. We need the people who cause it to be the way it is to make those investments and make it quickly.
I mean, it should be a priority, right? I mean, I think that, like, just in the context of climate change, and we're all here for that, so there's no, preaching to the choir around this. But we often omit the social debt, I'll say social debt, around who is impacted by climate events, climate change the most, and it's people who look like us, right? And people of low income who have been dealing with this for a long, long time, whether it's in the cities or rural America or coastal, all over, wherever there's climate challenges. So we're really used to that. And, for me, farming in Chicago for 25 years and watching the climate warm up, literally, when I started, we were in like zone 4, and now we're like 5, 6. Literally doing hands-on research, practical research, but not research for research's sake, to take it somewhere else, but just to figure out how to do this. Because if people don't have food near them, I can't do other things. I can't, from my ethics and the way that I work, especially as an artist and doing social change work, and we're all creative. So I think that's also a little kind of magic sauce that, multidisciplinary polymath approaches are critical in something as complex as dealing with our planet's climate. That's volatile, and we don't understand it, and we actually do, we make a difference with what we do. Going in the city from the south side, and it's sunny and beautiful, and then going west, and it's, like a hurricane type weather. I've had days like that. So this is not new to us. We've been on the front lines for such a long time, we just have not had the attention of the economic world, and now we do. And so this is an opportunity to really not just learn from us and extract from us, or even through the Biden administration with Justice 40. That was amazing. We had 40% of all this resources and infrastructure, but we were doing energy projects. We weren't able to get a large investment, and we were far down the line, and because there's so many all kinds of reasons. We weren't invested in the same way. So even when there is opportunity, we're still at the bottom of the list. Even when we're in front of everything, we built a digester. We're creating energy. We have the first community agreement with Argonne, signed, for all the labs, the external research and the defense ones. First one, because we're creating energy out of food waste on some Back to the Future type stuff. This really is what it is, Remember when they put some banana peels in?
And it's
so so this technology is not new, but it's new in the U.S. because we are so, dinosaur blood oriented. That's what I call oil when I'm being funny. So just having that, and we walk with that, and we understand it, and we have to translate that to our communities, not to folks who are just getting into the anxiety of not only having economic challenges, but now climate. So these things I think are really important, and Chicago is such an interesting city because we birthed redlining. That came, the community that I work in, which is Auburn Gresham, which is kind of a straight line, Auburn Gresham and then Englewood, is where redlining was birthed. And redlining, I want you to explain redlining, because I love how you
the one next door was Woodline, but it was Lorraine Hansberry's father who brought forth the Supreme Court case to ban restrictive covenants, which was a tool used to kind of protect. It's the same kind of, and I think part of this conversation around, how ecosystems are, it is also history. You know what I mean? The immigrant story. This is why it's so fascinating in our history right now, how, what we'll learn from this through these kind of, what we're hearing on a daily basis and what's happening, the fear of people speaking out about what's happening, right? That you've gone from one end, and that the offense of speaking the truth to power. But for someone like me, who's like, Black in America, which means like we've been here since there was no America, and that most Black Americans are a mix of people who have been here before there was America, right? And so that's the chip on a lot of our shoulders, is that we look at these contexts of really a global racial caste that has been created, and wealth and work that people have been doing for generations. And to your point, how did we end in Chicago, right? We came to Chicago fleeing. People owned land. I got into this space through policy. I got into urban ag because the first thing I worked on when I worked for Congressman Rush was a project called ROSA from this brilliant professor, God rest his soul, Ray Waters at DePaul, called Reclamation of Southern Assets. And what he was doing with legal students who were becoming lawyers is to look at how much assets were being lost as people migrated to the northern cities, and the theft that was happening on their land and then being resold for timber and rights, that people are getting passive income. These are the kind of things that fellow Americans were doing to other Americans. So it's like, this is the conflict that we're still trying to deal with. And I think that that's embedded in a lot of this work that we're doing, that we're saying, oh, look, we're trying to figure out something. And even in our communities, it's kind of like, I'm going to watch, it doesn't mean that everybody's in on the deal, because there's been so many times that it has not equaled anything. And so there's a lot of risk in that. So these kind of, the kind of implied language when you see us together and the network that we built is important, that what's not being said, that people see us working together. Because we have to figure this out when the political winds change, not just nationally, but locally, right? What it takes to get something done. We all are moving through a same system as if we all have the North Side resource, but we don't. But we're all like, oh, it's the same rules. But part of it is like that's the tension, I know you have more questions, but.
I love the panel that can interview itself. Y'all work together, just go.
I'm sitting over there sometimes, so let me pass the mic back.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I'd love to ask the question of, when you think about climate, and Erica, you've touched on this, you've all kind of indirectly hit it a little bit. How does climate fit the narrative that you are building, both at home with community and then externally with folks with whom you might want to partner who may not be rooted in Auburn, Gresham, or in Englewood? So how does climate fit into the story?
Yeah, I can say for me, it's that the things that, and it's just the nature of the work I've always done, is that the things I'm figuring out, and I'm a she, her, hers, we, us. So I'll say we. I work collectively. I really think about what I do, what I lead, and the coalescence of whatever manifests, right? These living, breathing, fifth-dimensional spaces, as being spaces for not only the people, but nature, and having oases within all of this degradation is really important, and that the relationship with nature and the relationship with an ecosystem of similarly positioned collaborators nationally. We have a huge network of folks through all kinds of coalitions that are doing similar work. So the things we're figuring out in Chicago, we're going to talk to our friends in Detroit, our friends in Oakland, our friends in North Carolina, South Carolina, Atlanta, like New York, so on and so forth. Like there's this work has not been isolated in Chicago. For the last 8 years, I've been focused on Chicago, but I worked nationally and trained and created, shared what we were figuring out in our projects over the years, and sharing that with other folks who are just starting, and having grassroots technology that didn't require a lot of money, because we don't have access to it. The redlining that I'm talking about is that literally banks drawing lines around areas and saying, we will not loan here. So not having the capital to scale, and even the experiences we all are having and raising capital, and we need grant capital. I mean, we have regular capital. Capital is too expensive. Intermediaries are more expensive because we don't have wealth. We don't have collateral. So being able to work nationally to be able to coalesce the resources to actually scale or kind of really secure the vision. And for the community, especially young people, I like to focus on teens because they can see themselves they need to see themselves in their future, right? They need to see these things in our own communities, not elsewhere, because it's a reflection of who we are. And to be able to inspire and create those kinds of experiences for our young people to go to another city and see the same thing. That's the future, right? That's the future of taking what we're figuring out here and then taking it somewhere else, not just with our peers, but creating sort of a network of like-minded and positioned people and coalitions so that we're able to build these futures.
Can I just add to that about how we deal with climate in our community? I know you guys are all very smart people here. I recognize my community got a whole lot of other stuff to worry about, like rent and how they're going to feed themselves. So it's our responsibility who are in positions to come to you guys, right, while they worry about the life of feeding themselves. I want to say, climate, for a lot of us, is a front of mind, but for a lot of people, it's food, it's rent, right? But there's creative ways of bringing community along, right? That does not feel condescending and doesn't feel like you're not recognizing the immediate need. So we have a workforce development program. We teach Roots for Success, which teaches environmental literacy. What? Right? They spend 12 weeks learning about something that they interact with every day but didn't have a name for it, right? And we call it job training, right? They get to be on the farm, where for many of them it's the first time really seeing the essence of where their food comes from. Do I call it climate? They see us take over an empty lot and turn it into green space. So how we deal with climate is to make it something you can touch and feel and interact with. Not something with big words and fancy charts, but how you could reclaim an empty lot and grow your own food. How you could sit in a curriculum. We've been doing Roots to Success for years before it became sexy to talk about green jobs. But we hoped that this is where the country would go. We saw it and we wanted to prepare our community to be the first to take on these jobs. So for me, dealing with climate is just making it part of the daily culture without calling it something big and fancy. But it's just life. It's food you eat. It's the empty lots you see and converting them into active spaces. And then they get the perks of it. It's teaching green energy without even making it a big, fancy, scary, I have to go to the University of Chicago to learn about it, right? Like they can be part of that learning.
So climate is life.
Yeah,
it's a big. I think part of what I would add to that is like where the frontier is going. Like because we're creating the reason the neighborhood created a district as opposed to just the trail was to address, in particular in Inglewood and West Inglewood, is air quality, where you have, really high asthma rates. That's an issue. The other issue is water, access to clean water, which is the lead service lines that are littered throughout the city. These are huge infrastructure projects that the Inflation Reduction Act was trying to address. These are the real kind of critical things that impact people's lives, the ongoing kind of degradation of the quality of life. And this also is just another layer added on to like, well, why is the life expectancy 10 years shorter in our zip code? That's the zip code they're talking about. And it's because of these kind of small things that you don't see on the day-to-day, but that are impacting the kind of day-to-day. And I think that is, I think what I've seen over the last several years is the younger people also being much more adept and knowledgeable about wanting to take a part of something. And so that's why I'm encouraged. I think that even though this seems very dark at this time, in this particular setting, I would say this is so important for the funders and the people who are here shifting dollars right now, right, to address that if those dollars are not impacting and don't have governance from frontline communities, then we are fooling ourselves. We are on some hot bullshit. Because we could tell ourselves what we would like to all hear, but the reality is that if these kind of projects across our country that American citizens, American people who live here, whether they have citizenship or not, who participate, right? Not to even, that this has to have traction and resource, because what it provides is a vision for the next generation when we're gone, right? It's like we're gonna say we're gonna put a Statue of Liberty up, but we're not gonna put it on Ellis Island. It's like the small things is like, and what I would also like to say in terms of the climate piece is that people want to participate. People are not sitting back waiting. That is such a misnomer, like that people are just kind of like waiting for a handout. And that is a line that is repeated over and over. And I'm like, where do these people live? And have you met these people? When people open up a Save-A-Lot or an Aldi and there is a line wrapped around the corner to get a job, what are we talking about here? So I think what I've seen in the last several years is because we live in the information age, because everyone can say anything that they want and guise it as freedom without being the responsibility that it is a lie. And it counters our real existence. I don't live in a city where I don't know any other people but black people. That's not my reality. I know all kind of people because I live in a city. And I have different connections with people. So I think that's part of the climate. We're part of the climate.
Yeah. No, I think you know all kinds of people. I'd like you to know a few more.
Yes.
Let's open this up to some questions. I think there's mics coming.
Hi, my name is Cassandra. I work at the intersection of climate, health, and policy. I also live on the South Side. I, unfortunately, however, live in Beverly, which is very sort of Beverly first, Beverly focused. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, and to all of you, is how, especially in a city that's very neighborhood oriented, how do you get neighborhoods to care about what's happening in the neighborhood across this sort of imaginary line? And like, what's the most effective way that we can engage and support our neighborhoods that are, one street away? Is it convince our aldermen to support environmental justice initiatives, to support remediation of brownfields? Is it, put the pressure on for the capital investments? Is it physically show up and get our hands in the dirt to support? What's the most effective way we can stop pretending like we're in totally different spaces here?
Well, I would just offer, one of the things that we have been doing for the last couple of years was our urban ag crawl. And when we did our first crawl, what we realized is, to your point, is that all Chicagoans, most people who live in cities, are dwelling in their neighborhood. And what we found and heard from people who attended was like, oh, I didn't even know this community garden was here. And I've been here 70 years. And I live 5 blocks away, right? Because, and by 5 blocks, I'm like not literally just 5 blocks, but to your point, I could live in Auburn Gresham, and I didn't know that these community gardens exist in Inglewood because I'm not stopping there. Or I'm over here all of the time, but I never went and traveled your neighborhood. I just went to a meeting there, right? I was in Pilsen. I didn't know this cool spot was there because we didn't take the time. So what we've been trying to build is this kind of interconnection. And what happened in our city in the last, I would say, is like the neighborhoods have taken on such a strong identity, which is great. But then it has a downside to it. It's like, well, that's not my issue. That's over there. Right, so some of that now is where we know that we need each other as a region, and not just but that takes a lot of work because what now a generation is like, this is an Inglewood problem. right? But if you cross 55th Street and you're in back of the yards, or if you cross the expressway, and it depends on what era you, so the people who are the greatest generation, there are very few of them left. Inglewood was across the expressway as well. So their boundaries of what we're calling certain neighborhoods have shifted. It's shifted in my lifetime. So I think that there's these small kind of acts of Chicagoans getting to see other parts of Chicago and being intentional about it. I think that's something the city can continue to do better, to encourage, these kind of, the taste of, I mean, these are things that I think that the city is trying to do that would allow for us to see the culture. I think of like the house music picnic that just happened that brings people from all over the world to like, oh, this is the birthplace of EDM. So this is what's happening in Berlin. Like Chicago's the Mecca, like the Mecca of like all the DJs are like, I know these guys, and this is music that started on the south side of Chicago. So this kind of interconnection of like, there's a lot of stuff that I think that we can be more intentional about.
Consider, can I just add, like, politicians change. If you like shopping at farmers market, pick a new one every Sunday. Google it, right? Because sometimes we're waiting for other people to do it for us, right? I live on 87th and Ashland. We're right off the Dan Ryan, and this year they created new walkways to force you to come through the neighborhood and not just stay in Beverly. But there's little things you could do. You like small boutiques? Pick a new one. Like, these are just little actionable things that you can take just to take yourself out of your own neighborhood. Take a train ride ever so often. Challenge yourself. We got buses. Challenge yourself, I'm gonna take a bus from east to west. And so instead of just waiting for the big thing to happen, but we do want the urban ag crawl to be seen on the city stand, a place everyone could visit. So it's called the Chicago Urban Ag Crawl. We want to add it and expand it throughout the community. But there are things you can do. Make that decision.
Is there an urban ag crawl coming up? How do people sign up to come on your
Well,
next
we're not
one?
doing it this year. We're kind of taking a pause. We're going to
Okay.
have a barbecue that's going to happen.
Okay, barbecue.
But we're going to plan to do it much bigger next year because the whole idea is this kind of interconnection between neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So the travel in Chicago so Beverly can go visit. Because the community gardens are really small and specific. And even if you live in a neighborhood, like I live in South Shore, you don't always know about the community garden. It's like these little secret oases in our community. And I think that is what we've been trying to, so we are open to other people who are in Chicago, uptown. We want to kind of bring that together. And we see that as like where in particular Black and brown folks have been able to kind of really coalesce because that's a lot of whose hands are in the soil. So there was something that we could kind of work with there to kind of bring us closer to even start fostering a conversation, not with intention, like y'all got to come and talk, but through food.
I think we had a question in the back.
Hi, everybody. Do I need to stand or can everyone see me? Okay. Hi, my name is Kevin Smith. I'm an assistant professor of economics and finance at Beloit College. So I was on the tour this morning. I got to see all of your organizations. It was really lovely for you to show us like what you guys are doing. So my question has to do, so maybe an interesting question around governance, right? So seeing all of these organizations, I'm like, oh, this is such great work. And I could see you had all these plans for the future. But in terms of the future, in terms of succession and like how do you think about this? It's something that's just really personal to me because I don't know about you, but I've had too many Black-owned businesses that I love and I supported closed down because they just didn't have the succession plan. Again, and actually capital is hard, but then maybe one person who owned it got sick and then there was nothing left and the business had to close down. So how do you think about those areas? Because as I saw today, you guys are planning on growing and being connected, but you also have to have a plan of like what happens in the future and who takes over.
Well, go ahead, Erica.
I mean, I'm part of a lineage, right? So I was trained and worked and supported my father's work through Growing Power out of Milwaukee and opened a Chicago office in 2001, too. And I made that decision because oftentimes we're encouraged to leave the family business. We're encouraged to go out and the independent and pushing that, when really that's not how you build wealth. So you know, even if it's not something that that you're particularly interested in, but you find a connection, like that is stability. So I, rather than just starting my own thing, wanted to fortify what my father was doing and then build on it. And so oftentimes it's legacy, right? It's the one, it's like that we have these stars that we prop up and well-deserving. But for me, it's building a lineage. So I have in my bag, but I have a picture of my director of farms. I started working with him when he was 9, three generations in Cabrini Green. He is now 32, doesn't live in Cabrini Green, lives actually 2 blocks from me in Woodlawn, and it has, you know, elevated out, not only out of those conditions, but has been able to secure the futures of many, many of his cousins and family who also grew up in those conditions through urban agriculture. So really having, and this is where our kind of, you know, just the legacy of being, you know, going to the University of Chicago or wherever we go to school and having these opportunities, and rather than, you know, going for self, going into, you know, just straight up wealth building and, you know, all of that, which you know, it's fine. It's just the calling to continue those lineages and to have those failures, like, you know, Growing Power closed because of we accomplished our mission, and my dad wanted, you know, he kind of has a John Henry thing. He just wanted to keep on going, and it was time for him to transition that leadership to me, and I was well prepared, but he couldn't do that, and it's really hard, I think, especially for Black men who it's just such a personal thing, but have just been victimized, and you know, on so many levels that's part of our repair work. So for me to look behind me, or really side by side in front of me, to have my son today, you know, up in there working with the guys, so he's working alongside, and he wanted to do that, and he's got the privilege, and he's Black and brown, so he's got all kinds of intersectionality, and he's interested in the business. He's interested in politics and government because he's grown up with us, right? Our young people, I'll go, I'm not drinking coffee as much as I used to, but I'd roll up to a Starbucks and there'd be somebody who I trained when I was a Park Kids instructor at South Shore Cultural Center who remembers me, or somebody in a program. Like this is how we do that when there's failures, when those businesses close. I mean, I had a moral imperative to make sure that work continued, because when we fail, it's not the same as a VC project that $400 million just, you know, is just blown for whatever. That can continue. That person can go and fail. They can even become president. So those things can happen, right? We can't do that, and that is a fact. That's the truth. So I took it very seriously. It was really important to me, especially moving into a healing apparatus and being very focused on eventually having economic sovereignty and freedom, and being able to have non-extractive economies based on things that nourish and create generativity, so that doesn't happen, so that the community can coalesce around these businesses. And we have ample resources and capital, lines of credit. We don't even work with lines of credit. It took our organizations, when we finally started getting some very generous gifts, to invest our money. We just spend our money every year instead of like investing it, because that is not something, managing wealth and having access to it for a longer period of time is new. So that is, I think, a critical thing. It's something that I think about, we all think about, and are preparing for. I'm not trying to do this forever.
We are people of a certain age now.
Yes. I've been farming since I was 8. So I'm well, like, you know, I'm in that space where I have a passion for sharing what I've learned, so that it continues, and not about me, but the lineage, because it takes so long to learn these skills too.
But like my colleague Cecile, she's the executive director.
Shout out Teamwork.
Teamwork Inglewood. There's a consequence. Succession, we think about it all the time, but there's a consequence people don't think about. we're investing in kids and young people who don't have University of Chicago degrees, right? Because we believe it's important that they take over these organizations. So there's a lot of money and time invested in individuals that don't even have the starting skill set. So when we employ our community, employ the people that we think should be ready to take over, it's a lot of investment. We're talking about, I invest a lot of money in professional development, partnerships with our community colleges, things that other people don't think about. Why? Because succession planning is so important to us, like to ensure that each of our organizations is inherited by the community and people of communities or like-minded communities. But that requires a lot of investment that's very different from other businesses that aren't worried about who the next ED is going to be. We have to worry about that. And so that requires a lot of investment in time and mentoring and investment in getting them to get themselves ready to take this over. Very different from another organizational structure where you don't care who comes in and when they leave. We care when they come in, and we are all trying to encourage them to stay because we ain't trying to be forever.
I mean, and I think that it's also just been a great learning example from the previous generation who held on to power and not have the intentionality to make sure that the next generation of young people, like, it's time for you to step into another role, as opposed to, like, I always got to be the person to lead. And leadership can take on a lot of different forms. And in order to be a really effective leader, you have to be a great follower. And oftentimes people don't spend enough time thinking about followership. They always want to just, especially in a culture that kind of gives the star all the credit. And so we're very conscientious around the kind of, like, folks come in and say, like, they got the solution, or like, we are not really with that jam, because that is not sustainable, But I think that is also part of being the intention, that there's enough room for all of these things to coexist, though, as well. So that's when I think part of our, in terms of the ongoing ecosystem, also continuing.
I think you all nailed the wrap up of my job. So yet again, the collaboration here has done what I need to do. This conversation on power and place, you've shown us how it happens, from the governance to the work to the collaboration, but to the understanding of our shared history and the possibilities where we can go together. So I suspect you'll have a lot of folks coming to all the events, but more importantly, partnership and collaboration in neighborhoods, between neighborhoods, from today into this future that you've been describing. And I look forward to everyone here being a part of what comes next. Thank you, everybody.